On the very day of September 11, several commentators drew a parallel with the historical events of Pearl Harbor.
And it's a day that will, as was the case with Pearl Harbor, live in infamy in American history.
The last time there was an attack like this on the United States was Pearl Harbor.
Reminiscent of another terrible day, the attack on Pearl Harbor.
But there was also someone on the same day who offered a prediction.
After the attack on Pearl Harbor, guess what we did? We went back and found out that, yes, the evidence was there. We should have known. And again, I think what we're going to see, even in this instance, this Pearl Harbor of the 21st century is very much the same kind of thing.
In fact, the more information that has been emerging about September 11, the more we have come to realize that many different aspects of the two events bear a chilling resemblance to each other. While both events were needed by the U.S. to go to war, in both cases, the ultimate goal was not the one initially stated.
Roosevelt knew a surprise Japanese attack would enrage the public and jumpstart the American war machine. In this way, FDR would get backdoor entry into what he really wanted: war with Hitler.
According to their own documents, before 9/11, the neocons knew that a surprise attack, like a new Pearl Harbor, would enrage the public and jumpstart the war machine against Afghanistan. In this way, they would get a backdoor entry into what they really wanted: the war with Saddam Hussein.
From the very beginning, there was a conviction that Saddam Hussein was a bad person and that he needed to go.
He says that going after Saddam Hussein was topic A 10 days after the inauguration, 8 months before September 11th.
Before and during the war, the propaganda machine made a relentless effort to create a direct connection between Hitler and Japan.
One poll taken immediately after Pearl Harbor showed that more than 60% of Americans believed that Germany was behind the attack.
The Bush-Cheney propaganda machine made an even harder effort to create a direct association between Iraq and Osama bin Laden. By the end of 2003, nearly 70% of Americans believed that Saddam was implicated in the September 11 attacks. Top levels of the Roosevelt administration knew in advance that Pearl Harbor was going to be attacked.
General Marshall and Admiral Stark, and indeed FDR, indeed knew that Pearl Harbor was being painted for a bombing run by the Japanese.
Secretary of State Cordell Hull even knew the exact day of the attack, a week before it took place.
Cordell Hull was Secretary of State, and he called me on Saturday morning and he started to relate that Pearl Harbor would be attacked on December the 7th.
Before September 11, many in the intelligence community knew the attacks were on their way.
There was so much discussion about this attack. Everybody was talking about it. George Tenet had some meetings. Other analysts had meetings at the White House.
Vital information on the Japanese attack was kept from those who could have used it to defend the Hawaiian port and to minimize the number of American casualties.
Two men could use that information immediately: Admiral Husband Kimmel and Lieutenant General Walter Short, the commanders at Pearl Harbor. But they never get it. According to Hill, that was no mistake.
If FDR and his administration deliberately withheld the vital intelligence from Pearl Harbor, and all the evidence indicates that they did, then it was certainly a deliberate conspiracy to set Pearl Harbor up for a total defeat.
Before September 11, important information was kept from counterterrorism czar Richard Clark, who could have organized a defense and even have prevented the attacks altogether.
You have to intentionally stop it. You have to intervene and say, no, I don't want that report to go. We therefore conclude that there was a high-level decision in the CIA ordering people not to share that information.
In both cases, the pre-knowledge by the U.S. government on the upcoming attacks was denounced in front of Congress.
In September 1944, Republican Representative Forrest Harness of Indiana made the first congressional charge about a Pearl Harbor conspiracy. He said that 3 days before Pearl Harbor, the Australian government had warned Washington that a Japanese aircraft carrier was headed towards Hawaii. But, he said, that information was withheld from Kimmel and Short.
After September 11, Republican Congressman Curt Weldon denounced the pre-knowledge of information on the upcoming attacks, which was intentionally withheld from the intelligence community.
This is an attempt to prevent the American people from knowing the facts about how we could have prevented 9/11, and people are covering it up today.
When honest officials stumbled on important information on the Japanese attack, they went straight to their superiors, only to see that information ignored, diverted, or suppressed altogether.
The Chief of Naval Intelligence in Washington, Captain Alan Kirk, recognized the message as plans for a bombing raid, but his persistent attempts to warn Kimmel ended when he was assigned to other duties. At Pearl Harbor, the Admiral had no way of knowing that Kirk had been repeatedly refused permission to warn him.
In August 2001, FBI agent Colleen Rowley discovered information that could have led to uncover the September 11 plot. But her memos never got past her superiors, while she was prevented from pursuing the investigation any further.
Finally, it turns out they were not read by the lawyer in the FBI who had the duty to send those over to the Department of Justice.
Hours before the Japanese strike, Roosevelt's Chief of Staff, George Marshall, became suddenly unavailable, delaying the process of communication within the chain of command.
General George Marshall, the man who should have acted, was nowhere to be found. Colonel Rufus Bratton was responsible for keeping Marshall supplied with such vital information. For Bratton, Marshall's sudden unavailability at a time when America was on the brink of war could not have been accidental.
In the crucial hours of September 11, Defense Secretary Rumsfeld and other top military became suddenly unavailable, hampering the decisional process within the chain of command.
For 30 minutes, we couldn't find him.
Withholding information, however, may not have been sufficient to guarantee the success of the Japanese attack. The military capacity of the Hawaiian port was also kept below its requirements.
General Short, faced with the need to send out long-range patrols, had only a handful of suitable aircraft. His demands for more were not seen as a priority.
On September 11, only 4 jets remained on alert to defend the entire sector of the country most likely to suffer an attack.
I've determined, of course, that with only 4 aircraft, we cannot defend the whole northeastern United States.
President Roosevelt gave direct orders not to interfere with the Japanese attack.
President Roosevelt told General Marshall to send a message to the Hawaiian and Philippine commanders, don't interfere with Japan's overt act of war. The United States desires that Japan commit the first overt act.
There's no argument about what FDR meant. He meant that the U.S. naval plan to defend Pearl Harbor should not and cannot be executed.
On September 11, Vice President Cheney gave a direct order regarding the plane headed towards Washington, which in fact resulted in the plane reaching its target without being shot down.
The young man said, Vice President, the plane's 10 miles out. Do the orders still stand? And the Vice President sort of whipped his head around and said, of course they do.
It was thanks to the indignation for the 3,000 sailors killed at Pearl Harbor that President Roosevelt could finally enter a war the U.S. had been preparing for months in advance.
With confidence in our armed forces, with the unbounding determination of our people, we will gain the inevitable triumph, so help us God.
It was thanks to the indignation for the 3,000 victims of September 11 that President Bush could launch a war that had already been prepared in the smallest detail. CNN and Time magazine have reported that on September 10, 2001, a military plan to attack Afghanistan had been placed on George Bush's desk to be signed by the president upon his return from Florida.
May God grant us wisdom, and may He watch over the United States of America.
Then came the official commissions, which in both cases were tasked to find out whether there had been a conspiracy by the same authorities that were suspected of having participated in the conspiracy.
Just 3 months after VJ Day, Senator Alvin Barkley of Kentucky convenes the Joint Congressional Committee on the investigation of the Pearl Harbor attack. The committee lays much of the blame on the commanders at Pearl Harbor and largely exonerates FDR and his top advisors. But its conclusions draw charges of cover-up and cronyism.
gross negligence becomes high treason when the motive is discovered or understood.
In July 2004, the Commission published its final report.
2.5 million pages of documents. We've interviewed over 1,200 individuals, including experts and officials past and present.
However, the Commission report failed to meet many of the family's expectations and concluded that 9/11 was merely a failure of imagination.
Published in 2004, the 9/11 Commission report has become the central focus of criticism by the 9/11 Truth Movement, a movement comprised of thousands of individuals and associations from all over the world, all connected through the Internet. The Commission's report is accused of having simply rubber-stamped the government's version of the events by ignoring all the evidence against it, while covering up its most conspicuous holes with a long series of omissions, distortions, and even plain falsehoods. Led by researcher David Ray Griffin, an international panel of 20 experts on 9/11 has compiled a list of the strongest evidence against the official version that has emerged to this day. This evidence is available to the public on their website in 4 different languages. Despite all the evidence that has emerged in the last decades, there are many who still reject the idea of a conspiracy at Pearl Harbor and prefer to reassert the much more simplistic explanation called the official version.
There was no conspiracy. FDR did not know. Cordell Hull did not know. The American government did not know that the Japanese were going to attack Pearl Harbor on December 7th, 1941. It was what has been called a failure of imagination.
Despite all the evidence presented in the last 10 years by the 9/11 Truth Movement, there are many who openly support the official version by the government and dismiss such evidence as irrelevant. These people are known as debunkers, as their stated intent is to debunk the evidence presented by the 9/11 Truth Movement against the official version. The most authoritative debunker in Italy is Paolo Attivissimo, a member of an organization called CICAP, which has openly declared war on the so-called conspiracy theorists. Attivissimo has held numerous conferences on 9/11 in which he has covered all the most important aspects of the debate. The most prominent champion for the official version in France is Jérôme Quirant, who also wrote a book called September 11 and the Conspiracy Theories. Quirant also participated in numerous conferences and television debates on 9/11 in his own country. But the flagship for the debunkers worldwide is certainly the American magazine Popular Mechanics. In 2006, they published a book called Debunking 9/11 Myths, in which the authors purport to have refuted all the major claims against the official version by the 9/11 Truth Movement.
Jim Miggs is the editor of Popular Mechanics magazine. In 2005, he and a staff of reporters decided to take on the factual and scientific claims made by members of the 9/11 conspiracy movement. The results were first published in a magazine article, then more fully developed in a book titled Debunking 9/11 Myths: Why Conspiracy Theories Can't Stand Up to the Facts.
I think what Popular Mechanics did with the 9/11 conspiracy theory was just about one of the best things ever done in the history of skepticism. That is exactly how it should be done. Here's the claim, here's the answer. Here's the claim, here's the answer. By the end, they got nothing to stand on. Boom, end of story.
But is it really so? The debate on September 11 can roughly be divided into these areas of discussion. We have the 4 hijackings as the overarching event of the day, and we have the 3 different locations that were hit by the 4 airplanes. One of them hit the Pentagon, another crashed in Shanksville, Pennsylvania, the other 2 hit the Twin Towers in New York. The debate on the hijackings is divided in 3 parts. The first one focuses on the air defense and whether the failure to intercept the hijacked airplanes was accidental or intentional. The second focuses on the hijackers and whether they were actually aboard the airplanes or just the usual patsies. The third part focuses on the aircraft themselves and whether the 4 airplanes used in the attacks were the same ones that took off from the airports that morning or were something that only resembled them from the outside. What initially raised suspicions on the true role of the military on September 11 is the fact that the U.S. air defense, which is arguably the most advanced and sophisticated in the world, was unable to intercept even one of the 4 hijacked airplanes in the course of over 1.5 hours.
I remember thinking, where on earth are the interceptors? I'm an old interceptor pilot, and it's absolutely unbelievable that hijacked airliners could fly around for an hour and 40 minutes without being intercepted.
As a former Minister of National Defense, why did airplanes fly around for an hour and a half without interceptors being scrambled? Take them, with a quick reaction alert. They should have been in the air in 5 minutes or 10 minutes. If not, as a Minister of National Defense, I would want to say, why not?
This astonishing failure to respond was remarked by Senator Mark Dayton in the post-9/11 congressional hearings.
But what I find much more shocking and alarming were the repeated and catastrophic failures of the leaders in charge and the other people responsible to do their jobs, to follow established procedures, to follow direct orders from civilian and military commanders.
The official justification for this failure is a series of blunders, miscommunications, and mistakes that has come to be known as the incompetence theory.
On that day, you saw a lot of well-meaning, confused people struggling to make sense of a terrible situation. They didn't even know where the planes were.
One argument for the incompetence theory is that the air defense was conceived to protect the U.S. from external threats, not internal ones.
The fact is that our air defenses, the whole NORAD system, was not at all geared towards protecting us from domestic aircraft. Quite the contrary. It was all set up to detect aircraft coming in from overseas.
La difesa era predisposta per difendersi da attacchi provenienti dall'esterno.
L'America era come fosse un castello con un fossato, ma questi hanno usato una catapulta per entrare. Saltando il fossato si sono trovati all'interno nel ventre mole dell'America e l'hanno potuta scolpare.
What the debunkers forget to mention is that the responsibility for tracking internal hijacks has never fallen on the military to begin with. This has always been the duty of the Civil Air Traffic Controllers, the FAA, as explained by the Secretary of Defense himself.
So the Department of Defense was oriented externally. Our radars were pointing out, not in, and the FAA was the one that then had the responsibility to say there's a hijack.
Only then, explains author and researcher Nafiz Ahmed, is the military requested for assistance in scrambling their jets.
Standard operating procedures dictate that as soon as a plane flies off course, the FAA will contact the plane and try to ask them what is going on. If there is a problem or if they cannot establish radio contact, then immediately the FAA will contact the Pentagon, who will, within a matter of minutes, a maximum of 10 minutes normally, will scramble fighter jets to intercept the civilian plane and to analyze the situation and see what is going on.
The FAA authority over the national airspace is clearly acknowledged in this exchange between the military from September 11.
If you can, hand the fighters over directly to FAA so they're still under FAA control. We're never going to take them. Just work with them, coordinate with them as best that you can with that. Take them to the area and let them handle that airspace.
Another argument for the incompetence theory is that by turning off the transponders, the hijackers had made the airplanes very difficult to be tracked on radar.
That can't be overstated. The fact that once the hijackers turned off the transponders, you had air traffic control who were looking at something like 4,500 primary radar blips. They were trying to pick out the plane that they just lost.
Non sapevano dove andare perché i terroristi hanno disattivato un dispositivo che si chiama transponder che localizza l'aeroplano. Spento quello, puff, sparisce il puntino. E dov'è? Non si sa dove è finito.
This is not true. When the transponder is turned off, the controllers lose the information on the altitude, but they can still track the plane as a primary signal. The following example shows how long it took an air traffic controller to find American 11 on his screen after he was told the plane had been hijacked.
Good morning, Washington. I got a situation here with American 11. We believe it's a possible hijack.
Okay, tell me more.
We lost radio communications with him. Then we lost his transponder. And right now the aircraft is just west of Albany going southbound.
Okay, I see him.
United 175 never turned the transponder off. It just switched codes.
United 175 is 50 miles northwest of New York City when its transponder code is suddenly changed.
As I look up, I notice that United 175's code has changed. I just turned around and radioed the pilot. My exact words were, United 175, recycle transponders flog.
Hijacker Al-Shehhi obviously intended to turn off that transponder, but because he just changed codes and didn't turn it off, he still left the controllers with a very clear indication of the normal return from an aircraft that was squawking, that's what we call it, with the altitude.
According to the Secret Service, the plane that hit the Pentagon was tracked for at least 30 minutes before it reached Washington.
Nelson Garabito was the Secret Service agent in charge of protecting the White House airspace.
First thing I did is I picked up the phone to call my contact, the FAA. He said, we have 4 planes outstanding. 2 have hit the towers, and 2 are headed to Washington, D.C. One of them approximately 30 minutes out, one of them approximately 45 minutes out.
The one 30 minutes out turned out to be the plane that hit the Pentagon.
As the one nearest us got closer and closer, 6 minutes out, 5 minutes out, we knew it was sort of over the CIA, and we thought, is that where it's going? But it kept coming.
United 93 was also being tracked after the hijacking.
We were tracking United 93, and I was in conversation with the FBI agent, and he was relaying to me that we suspect that this aircraft has now been taken over by hostile forces, described the sharp turn it made over eastern Ohio and now is heading back along southwestern Pennsylvania.
The airplane was being followed step by step, practically in real time.
Right now he is west of Johnstown still, 12 miles.
At some point, it even turned the transponder back on, showing not only its position, but also the altitude.
It looks like he's still turning. Hey, his transponder just came back on and it was showing 8,000 feet, 200. 8,200 feet? 8,200 feet, and he's on the same code that he was before.
Save for some moments of confusion, the 4 airplanes were being tracked by air traffic controllers all along. The real reason for the failure to intercept the 4 aircraft seems to have been the high number of military exercises that were being run by NORAD on September 11 out of their base in Cheyenne Mountain, Colorado. As Webster Tarpley noted in his book 9/11 Synthetic Terror, staff exercises or command exercises are perfect for a rogue network, which is forced to conduct its operations using the same communications and computer systems used by other officers who are not necessarily party to the illegal operation. Interestingly enough, on the evening of September 10th, the security level for the NORAD computer system, called Infocon, had been dropped to normal, the lowest level. This made it easier for anyone to penetrate or compromise the computer networks of the air defense system. On September 11, between 4 and 10 military exercises had been scheduled, some of them involving false hijacks of commercial airplanes. This unusual number of exercises had 2 major consequences. 1, they moved a large number of fighters out to Canada and Alaska. 2, they created a major confusion in the system as soon as the real hijackings were reported.
We have a hijacked aircraft headed towards New York, and we need someone to scramble some F-16s or something up there to help us out.
Is this real world or exercise?
No, this is not an exercise, not a test.
The process of authorization for scrambles was lengthy and complicated.
Hey, I just talked to Otis here, and they said they needed a NEADS authorization.
Confusion and pressure kept mounting.
I don't know where I'm scrambling these guys to. I need a direction, destination.
At times, communications were jammed.
If you could do me a favor and have them call us, we cannot call out for some reason.
Some in the military quickly realized the simulations were causing a problem.
You know what? Get rid of this goddamn sim. Hey, turn the sim switches off. Get rid of that crap.
I hope they cancel the exercise because this is ridiculous.
But they were not canceled. Even after both towers in New York had been hit, when everyone knew America was under attack, the war games continued.
You guys watching the news?
Yeah.
I wasn't sure. I've been watching for about 10 minutes. They suspend the exercise?
Not at this time, no.
Apparently, someone took advantage of the situation. While the plane headed for the Pentagon was quickly approaching from the west, an unknown source, which was never identified, reported that American 11 was headed towards the Capitol even though the plane had already crashed into the North Tower.
I just had a report that American 11 is still in the air and it's heading towards Washington.
Okay, American 11 is still in the air?
This attracted all the attention towards the so-called Phantom plane.
He's still airborne, he's still a hijack out there, but we can't get a position on him.
The jets from Langley were prepared to intercept it.
I don't know if they might want to alert some aircraft down there, though, too.
We have Langley on battle stations right now.
Okay.
Then they were scrambled straight for Washington.
Foxy, scramble Langley, head towards the Washington area. Roger that.
But a different command post, called Giant Killer, sent the fighters out to the ocean.
Say again where you want him?
We want him in the Whiskey 386 area.
This didn't sit well with the operations center.
Freaking Giant Killer in their wisdom sent him out over the water when we scrambled him to Washington.
By the time the plane headed for the Pentagon was circling the Capitol, it was too late for the Langley jets to intercept it. Even after the Pentagon was hit, the war games were not suspended. And again, while United 93 was being hijacked, another false alarm attracted the attention in the opposite direction.
Did you get the word? I got a Delta 89er southeast of Toledo.
Delta 89, that's the hijack. They think it's possible hijack. Fuck, south of Cleveland, we have a code on it now. Good, pick it up, find it. Fuck, another one.
Major Nazipany turned to Toledo Air Force Base.
I'm sorry to be so brief and quick on this, but there's another possible hijack about 50 miles east of Toledo, and you guys are the closest, and we need somebody airborne.
But instead of getting help, his authority was questioned.
What authority is this coming from? What authority is this coming from? The DO is the best I can tell you.
Nazipany vented his frustration to his superior, Colonel Marr.
He's going to tell his commander, the commander's going to call you, because he doesn't believe the authority.
Then they tried Duluth Air Force Base.
What about Duluth? Okay, Duluth, you got no fighters.
Nazipany went all the way to the western quadrant looking for help.
This is Major Cheney. Who is this?
Hey, Kenny, this is Nasty. How you doing?
Hey, doing all right.
Hey, we're not doing so good right now. What I'd like to do, possibly steal some aircraft out of Fargo from you guys.
But here, too, there were